January 13th, 2006, at 12:38 p.m., a call came into the police control room in the Argentine capital, Buenos Aires. The call was from Banco Rio Bank, and the man calling sounded extremely frightened. He reported that around 5 masked robbers had entered the bank with weapons and had taken 23 employees and customers hostage. As soon as this information reached the police control room, panic broke out. An incident like this in such an upscale area of the city could become a major blow to the police's reputation. Therefore, the police wasted no time and immediately sprang into action. Within minutes, the street that had been silent was suddenly filled with the sound of sirens and a line of police vehicles. Before long, nearly 300 police officers had surrounded the bank from all sides, including Argentina's highly trained and feared Falcon team. As soon as they arrived, police officers and commandos equipped with heavy weapons, bulletproof vests, and modern communication equipment took up their positions. Some commandos were quietly deployed onto the roof of the bank, while snipers took positions on nearby tall buildings. Their sniper rifles were aimed directly at the bank's entry and exit points. As soon as news channels learned about this high-profile drama, dozens of media vans and cameras flooded the area. Within a short time, the entire nation of Argentina was glued to their television screens. In just a few minutes, a quiet street had turned into a complete tactical war zone, and everyone's eyes were fixed on the bank, where a battle between life and death seemed to be unfolding inside. With every passing second, the lives of the hostages were in greater danger because the robbers had forced every hostage to lie on the floor at gunpoint. One robber, dressed in a gray suit, became furious that the police had surrounded them from all sides and that a surprise assault could be launched at any moment. When a police negotiator tried to communicate with the robbers through a microphone, it was the same man in the gray suit who responded from inside. He identified himself as Walter and angrily shouted a warning that the snipers stationed on the roof must be removed immediately. Otherwise, he would begin killing the hostages one by one. The police had little choice but to comply. A few years earlier, during a similar hostage situation, both robbers and hostages had been killed in a police shooting, turning the incident into a national scandal. No one wanted to risk repeating that mistake. After this, the police repeatedly appealed to Walter and his accomplices to release the hostages, promising that whatever demands they had would be considered in return. By now, nervousness was clearly evident in Walter's voice as well. At first, he hesitated, but as a gesture of goodwill, he agreed to release one of the bank guards. As soon as the guard came outside, he informed the police about the entire situation inside the bank. He told them that all the robbers had guns and bombs, but they were now nervous after seeing the massive police presence. Following the police's request, the robbers released 2 more hostages. This led the police to believe that the robbers were not violent and wanted to resolve the situation peacefully. Gradually, the atmosphere of the negotiations began to suggest that the robbers were moving towards surrender after seeing the huge police force surrounding them. From the way they spoke, it seemed as if they felt they had made a huge mistake by carrying out the robbery. The police started to believe that the entire situation was now under their control and that it was only a matter of time before the robbers would be arrested. However, at that moment, the robbers made a demand that left everyone stunned. They asked the police to send pizzas and soft drinks into the bank for both themselves and the hostages, and said that they would consider the terms of surrender in the meantime. The request seemed very strange. After all, how could robbers surrounded by more than 300 heavily armed police officers be thinking about eating pizza? Nevertheless, the police agreed to their demand, and within about 30 to 40 minutes, pizzas were delivered inside the bank. The situation became surreal. Outside, police officers stood with their weapons ready, while inside, the robbers and hostages were eating pizza together. At one point, the robbers even sang "Happy Birthday" for a bank employee. This behavior convinced the police that these were not dangerous criminals, but rather misguided individuals who would soon surrender. The police became considerably more relaxed and simply waited for the robbers to surrender and release the remaining hostages. But after that, the robbers suddenly stopped responding. The police repeatedly tried to contact them, but for nearly 3 hours there was no response at all. By now, afternoon had turned into evening, and the police were becoming increasingly concerned. They feared that the robbers might have become desperate and harmed the hostages. Meanwhile, the media was broadcasting the entire operation live, and the eyes of the whole country were fixed on the scene. Under growing pressure, at 7 p.m., a heavily armed Special Forces team launched an assault on the bank with a powerful explosion. They expected gunfire from inside or a final surrender by the robbers, but the moment they entered, the sight before them left even the officers shocked. The bank that had been surrounded by hundreds of police officers from the outside showed no sign of the robbers whatsoever. All the hostages were completely safe and unharmed, not even a scratch on them, but there was no trace of the criminals. It seemed as if the robbers had simply vanished into thin air. After safely evacuating the hostages, the entire police team, along with a special unit of detectives, began a thorough search of every corner of the bank. The detectives searched all the floors, but not a single dollar appeared to be missing, nor were there any signs of a struggle. This raised a troubling question. If the robbers had not stolen anything from the bank and had not harmed any hostages, then why had they come there in the first place? The answer was about to be revealed. As the detectives continued their search and reached the bank's basement, what they discovered left the entire team stunned. The walls were lined with hundreds of strong steel safe deposit boxes that had been targeted with remarkable precision, as if by experts. These vaults contained the inherited wealth and priceless treasures of wealthy and VIP clients. The robbers had completely emptied 143 out of 400 safe deposit boxes and had cleverly escaped with nearly $20 million worth of valuables. Seeing this, the police were stunned, but the real shock came when they discovered neatly arranged toy guns lying on the floor. The officers felt embarrassed, realizing that the gang, which had kept the entire government and security apparatus occupied for hours, did not even possess real weapons. There were bombs as well, but those too were fake. The clever robbers had even left behind a handwritten message that read, "In a neighborhood of rich people, without weapons and grudges, it's just money, not love." By now, the police understood that they had been drawn into a massive mind game. The robbers had never intended to spill blood. Their entire plan was to keep the police trapped in confusion and negotiations long enough for them to complete the theft and escape through a secret route. But the biggest question still remained. Where had they gone? Every entrance and exit of the bank had been guarded by police officers. The entire area had been sealed off. How could they have disappeared? While searching for the answer, detectives began a deeper investigation of the basement. What they found left them speechless. Behind the area where the safe deposit boxes were located, there was a large hole in the back wall. The hole led directly into a drainage tunnel, which eventually connected to a main road near the bank. The police finally understood what had happened. While some robbers upstairs had been holding hostages with fake guns and keeping the police busy with negotiations and pizza deliveries, another team downstairs had calmly emptied the bank lockers and escaped through the secret tunnel. The police, commandos, and detectives could only stare at one another in disbelief. It was one of the biggest and most ingenious robberies of the century. The police had remained standing outside while the robbers escaped with $20 million worth of loot without harming a single person. After this astonishing robbery, the reputation of the Argentine police and administration was at stake. However, from the very beginning, investigators had almost nothing to work with. They had no faces and no identities because the robbers had worn masks throughout the entire operation. Forensic experts began collecting fingerprints and DNA samples. But even here, the robbers had shown remarkable cunning. They had scattered fake hair collected from beauty salons throughout the bank so that DNA samples would become mixed and the investigation would be further complicated. Police examined all CCTV footage from the bank and surrounding areas, but the robbers had carried out the operation so carefully that identifying them seemed impossible. During the investigation, police discovered an important lead when they found a small rubber boat inside the sewer system. The robbers had likely left it behind in a hurry. A special rope attached to the boat led investigators to believe they might be able to trace the buyer. However, that lead also ended in disappointment because the purchase had been made entirely in cash. While police across the country were desperately searching for the robbers, a strange debate had begun on Argentine television talk shows. Some people condemned the robbery, while others considered the thieves to be geniuses and had become their admirers. Radio stations were flooded with calls, and surprisingly, most callers spoke in support of the robbers. One caller even said, "They robbed the rich without taking anyone's life. To us, they are heroes." Soon, the toy guns became the symbol of the robbery. Newspapers published photographs showing forensic teams placing children's plastic pistols into evidence bags. The pressure on the police became so intense that they launched the largest manhunt in Argentine history. But days turned into weeks, and the police found neither the robbers nor any meaningful clues. The brilliance of the criminals could be measured by one simple fact. By the time police stormed the bank at 7 p.m., the robbers had not only completed the theft and escaped, but were already sitting in the hideout, watching the operation live on television. But how had such a perfectly planned robbery been carried out? The mastermind behind the heist was not an ordinary criminal, but an artist named Fernando Araujo. Fernando was highly creative and sharp-minded, but his thoughts often drifted toward illegal activities. Ideas about thefts and robberies came to him like movie scripts. The first seed of this plan was planted in his mind after the failed Ramallo heist in 1999, where innocent people were killed during indiscriminate police gunfire. They were killed. He thought that why not carry out a robbery in which there is not even a trace of violence? He was so excited to execute this work that although this theft was carried out in 2006, Its preparation had already started 3 years earlier in 2003. For the robbery, he chose Banco Rio, where the money and gold of the city's wealthy people were kept. After that, he rented a house near Banco Rio and began exploring the underground sewer tunnels located near the bank. He knew that such a large and complicated job could not be done alone. To execute this mission, he needed someone he could trust blindly and who had strong technical skills. That is when he thought of an old school friend, Sebastian Garcia Bolster. Sebastian was a skilled mechanic who had great expertise in working with machines. One day, Fernando and Araujo said to him, "How about we rob a bank and disappear in such a way that the police won't have the slightest clue?" Hearing this, Sebastian was shocked, but he thought that maybe he was just talking nonsense while being intoxicated. In reality, although they were childhood friends, the two were completely different from each other. Fernando was a free-spirited artist who was always involved in strange activities, while Sebastian was a family man who lived his life according to rules and discipline. But Fernando knew very well that Sebastian could become the backbone of this entire mission. Therefore, Fernando slowly began to emotionally and logically convince him for this mission. At that time, Fernando Araujo was going through a very painful breakup. To escape his loneliness, he completely covered the windows of his loft with black paint so that he could not distinguish between day and night and remain completely cut off from the outside world. He grew high-grade marijuana there and spent all his time under the influence, watching films and documentaries about bank robberies. He would carefully study where previous robbers had made mistakes so that he could design a perfect heist. He expected that seeing his condition, Sebastian would eventually agree to help him. Fernando also had another strong reason to convince Sebastian. At that time, Argentina was going through a severe banking crisis called the Corralito, in which people were restricted from withdrawing money from their own bank accounts. Millions of people's savings were frozen in banks, and public trust in the banking system was completely broken. Sebastian himself was also a victim of this crisis. His family had lost their savings, and he had deep anger against banks. Fernando used that anger and convinced him that this robbery was not only about money, but also a way to take revenge from the system. When Sebastian was assured that no one would be harmed and that no real weapons would be used, he agreed to become part of the mission. After that, a plan began which would make this robbery the heist of the century. For nearly 2 years, Fernando worked on every small and big detail. First, he studied the structure of the bank in detail, obtained secret maps of sewer lines, and prepared a plan for a 15-meter tunnel that would connect the bank vault directly to the storm drain system. The entire operation was divided into 2 parts. The plan was that the first team would enter through the main gate, take employees and customers hostage, and keep the police busy in negotiations so that all attention remained on them. Meanwhile, the second team would go underground through the sewer line and reach the bank's basement wall through the tunnel to carry out the real theft. The plan was that once the work was done, all robbers would escape through the same tunnel, while the police outside would still believe that the thieves were inside. To perfect this plan, Fernando spent months surveying the bank inside and outside. The routine, behavior, and psychology of every employee, from managers to guards, were studied so that their reactions in a hostage situation could be predicted. Even toy guns were modified with weight so they felt like real weapons, so that no one would suspect anything. Every detail was prepared so precisely that it was not just a robbery, but a perfectly executed blueprint. However, such a large mission required more than just two people. Fernando needed experienced players who could remain calm under pressure. Through contacts, he met Ruben, Beto, Del Toro, and Dog. Beto and Dog were highly experienced in such robberies and had been part of the famous Super Banda gang in the 80s and 90s. Later, Luis Mauro Vitet joined the plan, who was specially chosen for this job. He was a skilled thief and also passionate about acting. He was the one who would later become Walter and mislead the police during negotiations. Along with them, a driver named Julian Zalachueria was also included, who would help them escape after the robbery. Because the sewer exit opened directly onto the main road, escaping from there carried a high risk of being caught. To avoid this, they made a clever plan. They cut a hole in the bottom of their van so that during escape, the robbers could come out of the sewer directly into the van through a manhole and leave without being seen. Now, the plan was ready, but the most important task was digging a 15-meter tunnel connecting the bank and the sewer line. This was the hardest part of the mission. Even making a small hole with an axe took an hour. To dig the tunnel, a 220-watt generator and an electro-pneumatic drill were used. For almost a year, they worked every night inside dirty, foul-smelling sewer water, using machines and hydraulic jacks to dig the tunnel. Sometimes the plan almost failed because the water level in the sewer would rise and stop the work. To solve this, they built a small dam inside the sewer to control water flow. They also used small inflatable boats to transport stolen goods out of the bank. After a lot of hard work, they finally reached the basement wall of the bank, where the safe deposit boxes were located. After long preparation, January 13th, 2006 was chosen for the robbery. At around 10 a.m., the Banco Rio Bank opened and customers started arriving as usual. Soon after, Fernando and his three partners entered through the front gate. Meanwhile, the main engineer Sebastian was waiting for a signal inside the tunnel below. Outside, driver Julian was sitting in his van monitoring the entire operation. At around 12:30 p.m., the first phase of the plan began. The robbers used fake weapons to take 23 employees and customers hostage, and Walter, in a grey suit, started misleading the police through negotiation. As soon as the signal was received, Sebastian entered the bank vault through the tunnel by breaking the basement wall. Sebastian and Fernando used electro-pneumatic drills and hydraulic jacks to break open 143 safe deposit boxes one by one. Gold bars, diamond jewelry, cash, and millions in assets were packed into bags and loaded into inflatable rubber boats. While pizza parties, negotiations, and media coverage were happening above, the police believed they were exhausting the robbers, but in reality, they were already trapped in a setup. By around 4 p.m., all the work underground was completed. The thieves then traveled through the tunnel to a manhole about 10 blocks away, where Julian was waiting with the van, and escaped with all the loot. Meanwhile, for about 3 hours, the hostages remained inside unnecessarily, while the police waited outside, believing the robbers were still inside the bank. At 7 p.m., when the police entered the bank with a blast, they found only the frightened hostages inside. The thieves, their treasure, and even their real identities had all disappeared. More than $20 million worth of assets had been stolen right under the police's nose, marking the largest non-violent robbery in Argentina's history. After this, the police put every possible effort into catching the thieves, but they could not be found. For weeks, hundreds of witnesses and thousands of hours of CCTV footage were analyzed, but nothing worked. It seemed as if the criminals behind Argentina's biggest robbery would never be caught. But as they say, no crime is ever truly perfect as long as emotions are involved. The thieves managed to escape the police, but they could not escape betrayal from their own people. One day, a woman came to the police and claimed she knew about the Banco Rio heist. At first, the police could not believe it. The criminals they had been searching for day and night, without a single clue, were suddenly being mentioned by someone. However, the woman provided proof. She handed over a piece of jewelry that belonged to one of the stolen 143 safe deposit boxes. The shocking part was that this woman was none other than the wife of one of the main members of the robbery team, Ruben Beto del Torre, named Alicia Diolio. After the robbery, Beto had received millions of dollars as his share and planned to betray his wife by running away with a young and beautiful girlfriend. When his wife discovered this, she angrily revealed everything she knew to the police. That was the turning point. The police first arrested Beto, and then, with his help, they captured Fernando Araujo and the rest of the gang. When the case went to court, an unusual situation arose in the Argentine legal system. The prosecution wanted to prove it was a serious and dangerous crime, but the defense turned the case upside down. They successfully argued in court that all the weapons used in the robbery were fake and no hostage was harmed. Under Argentine law, without real weapons, it could not be treated as a standard armed robbery. This single argument significantly reduced their sentences. In February 2010, the court announced its verdict. Mastermind, Fernando Araujo received 14 years, Sebastian Bolster received 9 years, and Beto received 15 years due to his past criminal record. Others also received long sentences. However, due to good behavior, all of them were released much earlier than their full sentence. What was even more surprising was that a large section of the public did not see them as criminals, but as heroes, because they had robbed a wealthy bank without shedding blood. This astonishing heist has inspired many famous books, movies, and documentaries. After his release, Fernando Araujo even entered the film industry. In 2020, the famous film The Heist of the Century was written by Fernando Araujo himself. In addition, the 2022 Netflix documentary Bank Robbers, The Last Great Heist, and Adolfo Palacios' famous book Cien Años de Honores were also inspired by this robbery. Some people even believe that the world-famous series Money Heist was inspired by this event, and they compare its main character, the professor, to Fernando Araujo.